There was something surgical in the way his shoes struck the floor, sharp, deliberate, too loud for the stillness of morning. The polished tile echoed like a metronome in a room where no one dared breathe. He didn't pause to greet the receptionist, didn't nod to the security guard, didn't acknowledge a single soul, just walked through the lobby like he'd built it himself. And in a way, he had. His name was Christopher Rains. 30-something, expensive watch, eyes bright with ambition, and just a hint too much hunger. The new CEO. 1 week into the job, already moving like a man sent to clean house. They had announced his arrival in one of those polished, feel-good emails about strategic evolution and fresh vision. I'd read enough of them in my 17 years to know what it really meant. Someone upstairs had sharpened the knife and heads were about to roll. Just not theirs. I watched him from behind the glass of my corner office. Not quite executive, not quite invisible. A space carved out of necessity more than prestige. Quiet enough that the interns didn't bother me. Far enough from the action to think clearly. Close enough to hear when it screamed. Christopher didn't knock. He opened doors mid-meeting, asked questions mid-sentence, scribbled on his tablet like the answers were wrong before he heard them. He smiled, but only when people stumbled. Not cruel. No, it was worse than that. It was the smile of a man who'd already decided what your worth was and was just waiting for you to find out. He didn't come to my office that day. I wasn't on his radar. That was fine. I preferred it that way. At lunch, we gathered in the break room like we always did, the old guard, the ones who'd stopped trying to keep up with the Red Bulls and buzzwords. Someone said he looked like a substitute teacher who thought he could fix the whole school in a week. We laughed, quietly, carefully. I stirred my tea and said nothing. I'd seen 3 CEOs come and go. One left for health reasons, one was escorted out for legal ones, and the last tried to outsource everything he didn't understand. They all made the same mistake. They thought experience came with titles. They never realized it lived in people like us, the ones who stayed when everyone else packed up their box. Later that day, I passed Christopher in the hallway. He looked right through me, glanced at my badge, then kept walking. Didn't ask my name, didn't ask what I did, didn't realize I was carrying the quarterly performance briefs he'd probably be quoting from at his next presentation. To him, I was just another tile in the floor he walked on, but something in the air shifted as I returned to my office. It wasn't loud, it never is, but it was there. The way conversations died when someone in a suit passed, the way managers avoided eye contact, the way Linda from HR looked like she hadn't slept in days. You can always feel the moment right before a company tips into something it won't come back from, like standing in the silence before a storm, and storms, real storms, they never need an introduction. You just hear the footsteps. The week unfolded the way water slips beneath a closed door, quietly, relentlessly, without any fanfare. There were no bold proclamations, no dramatic shifts at first. But the unease in the air was unmistakable. People started whispering in corners. Meetings appeared on calendars with vague titles like alignment review or efficiency audit. They ended with fewer people in the room than when they began. I stayed where I always had, half seen, fully present. I submitted my reports. I coordinated our weekly sync with Gold Peak Tech, carefully adjusting tone and language to ease over a recent accounting discrepancy that could have snowballed if handled with anything less than grace. I wrote emails in Mandarin, switched back to English, booked the translator for one of our newer account leads, and smoothed out the kind of frictions that would never appear on a quarterly brief. These were the invisible tasks that kept relationships alive. The ones that never made headlines but ensured contracts renewed and crises were avoided before anyone above middle management ever had to worry. Christopher didn't notice. But I noticed him. His movements, his questions, his quick, shallow smiles. He moved through departments like a cold front, sharp, sweeping, clinical. He didn't need to fire everyone himself. He had a method. Managers with decades of loyalty were summoned to short, quiet meetings. They didn't return. No goodbye parties, no emails of appreciation, Just empty desks and cardboard boxes filled with faded mugs, paperweights, and resumes that used to matter. And like clockwork, their replacements arrived. Bright-eyed, loud laughing, their confidence clung to their LinkedIn profiles like armor. Polished resumes, Ivy League MBAs, fluency in slide decks, not systems. They asked questions in meetings I hadn't heard in years. Basic, foundational things. One of them asked how to navigate a product portal we'd used for a decade. Another joked that our invoicing system was ancient, as if modernization was a punchline. They weren't cruel, just blind. Blind in the way only people who've never had to build anything from scratch can be. I said nothing. That was my strength. Observing, remembering, waiting. That's how you survive in a place like this. Not by being loud, but by being precise. It was during a Thursday morning all-hands meeting that I first felt something deeper shift. Christopher stood at the head of the table, flipping through slides at a pace no one could follow, talking in buzzwords that tried to sound like strategy. Efficiency. Streamlining. Strategic partnerships. Eliminating waste. He didn't look at me when he said it, but I knew. He didn't need to. I glanced at the others in the room. Some shifted in their seats. Some stared blankly ahead. Everyone knew what it meant. Evaluations weren't about improvement, they were warnings. Softly delivered ultimatums dressed up in executive language. When the meeting ended, people filed out quickly, heads down. I took my time gathering my papers, not because I had to, but because I wanted to move slowly. In a room built on panic, stillness becomes its own form of rebellion. As I stood, I felt a presence beside me. Margaret, right? It was him. He said my name, like he was trying to recall where he'd heard it before, like it was on the edge of a spreadsheet, not something he should have known from the start. Yes, I replied coolly. He smiled, the same smile I'd seen him give interns, consultants, janitors. A default setting, a placeholder for real attention. What exactly do you handle again? He asked. There it was. The moment. He didn't know. Didn't even have a vague idea. I could have told him my title. I could have rattled off the official responsibilities. International liaison, head of regional communications, legacy relationship manager. But none of that would have meant anything to him. Instead, I said, I manage our communications with Gold Peak Tech and several of our strategic partners in China. His brow twitched. We have someone doing translations, don't we? Don't just translate, I said evenly. I manage the relationship, the business etiquette, cultural expectations, contractual nuance, negotiations. He nodded, already turning away. Good, good. We'll be streamlining a lot of processes soon. Appreciate the work you're doing. Then he left. Just like that. I stood in the room, fluorescent lights humming above, and felt something cold settle into my chest. Not fear, not anger, certainty. He didn't understand. Worse, he didn't care to. The office buzzed around me with a kind of forced cheer, like everyone had decided to pretend the walls weren't crumbling. Phones rang a little louder. Conversations ended a little faster when doors opened. Linda from HR caught my eye as I passed her desk. She gave me a soft, cautious smile, a silent warning in the shape of a kindness. Back at my desk, I opened my laptop and began drafting a routine update to Mr. Ling at Gold Peak. Just another standard message, the kind I'd written hundreds of times before. Only this time I paused before I finished the subject line. How long would I still be here to send it? The next day came wrapped in quiet dread. A low gray sky hovered over the city, and the building felt unusually hushed, like even the walls were waiting. People avoided eye contact. Some had already packed up small personal items. Rumors of another restructuring circled like birds before. A storm. At 10:15 a.m., a new email landed in my inbox. Subject, meeting request. Christopher Rain's time, 10:30 a.m., location, conference room, B no agenda. Just a name. A room, a time, no warning, no context. I stared at it for a moment. Let the stillness wrap around me. Then I closed my folders, adjusted my jacket, and stood. Each step down that hallway felt like a countdown, like a movie you've already seen, but keep hoping might end differently. By the time I reached the door, I already knew how it would play out, but that didn't stop me from opening it. Christopher was already seated when I entered the room. He sat at the head of the long glass conference table, posture perfect, a beige folder laid out neatly in front of him like a script he'd already rehearsed. His face was unreadable, practiced, the kind you'd expect on a man who believed in his own authority more than the substance behind it. Linda, the HR director, was there too. 2 chairs down, face deliberately neutral. She didn't look at me, not directly. That told me everything I needed to know. Christopher gestured at the seat across from him, voice brisk. "Margaret, good to see you. Please have a seat." I sat, slowly, calm, hands folded on the table. No emotion, no expression. I'd been here before, not in this exact room, but in this position, watching someone make a mistake they wouldn't realize until it was too late. He opened the folder like it contained the secrets of the universe, glanced at the top page, then began, voice smooth as a pre-recorded message. "We've been reviewing our internal structure over the past few weeks, and after careful consideration, we've decided to consolidate certain functions." I didn't interrupt. "Your role, while valuable in the past, no longer aligns with the direction we're moving in." He smiled slightly, as if softening the blade. "We believe the external firm we've partnered with for language services will be sufficient, moving forward. There's simply no longer a requirement for a dedicated liaison." Still, I said nothing. Linda slid an envelope across the table. 2 months of severance, she said softly, plus unused vacation time. I didn't touch it. Christopher leaned back, mistaking my silence for confusion or emotional delay. "I know this may be difficult, but change is necessary for growth." He meant it. That's what was chilling. He genuinely believed in the corporate logic of it all. Believed that structure trumped history, that a partnership could be quantified in a spreadsheet, that a 17-year bond with one of our most valuable international clients could be reduced to a cost-cutting bullet point. I offered him a small smile. Not bitter, not angry, just pity, maybe. "Are you sure you can manage without me?" I asked, voice quiet but precise. He gave a short laugh, light, dismissive, condescending. "We'll be just fine. It's nothing personal." And just like that, it was done. I stood up, left the envelope on the table untouched, and turned to leave. But as I reached the door, I paused. "I wish you good luck on Monday." He blinked at that, confused by the specificity. But then he nodded, that same hollow smile still plastered across his face. "Thank you, Margaret. Best of luck to you as well." I didn't answer. I didn't look at Linda. I didn't even glance at the hallway I'd walked 1,000 times before. I just walked. Past the rows of quiet desks, past the eyes that didn't want to meet mine, past the familiar hum of printers and keyboards and phone rings that no longer belonged to me. Outside, the clouds were low and heavy. Rain tapped against the glass like fingers. I made it to my car before the sky opened up fully, the windows blurring into watercolor. I sat behind the wheel, gripping it tightly, not with panic, not even with sadness. Something colder, something firmer, the kind of grief that doesn't break you but reforges you. They thought I was replaceable, that a faceless agency out of Singapore could mimic what I'd built, that they understood the quiet language of trust, of etiquette, of patience. They didn't, and they would learn. Monday would prove it. The weekend was strangely still. I packed up my home office slowly, box by box, not rushed, not dramatic, just methodical. A farewell not to the job, but to the version of myself who stayed quiet for too long. Messages came in. A few brave colleagues texted condolences, nervous thumbs dancing around corporate NDAs. Others stayed silent. I didn't blame them. Survival mode makes cowards out of good people. By Sunday night, I was done mourning. I wasn't broken, just clear. I opened my laptop and updated my resume. Not because I was desperate, because I was ready. Monday morning, the city groaned to life beneath gray skies. I dressed deliberately, simple navy blouse, black slacks, a modest silver watch. Nothing flashy, nothing that said interview. Everything that said control. Lawson and Reed's offices were bathed in soft, natural light. Clean, modern, professional. The receptionist smiled genuinely. Mr. Reed himself met me in the conference room. Hands firm, questions sharp, eyes respectful. We talked about the importance of cultural nuance in business partnerships, about diplomacy, about foresight. He didn't talk over me. He listened. And when I answered, I felt something I hadn't in years. Heard. By the time I stepped back onto the sidewalk, the offer was already in my inbox. Better pay. More autonomy. A role built around what I did best, not a title someone else misunderstood. I accepted without hesitation. That afternoon, the texts started again. This time from the walls I'd just walked away from. He's calling you a social climber, one said. Told the board you were just clinging to relevance, said the company's better off without old gatekeepers. Another message. They replaced you with an agency from Singapore. No liaison now, just rotating contacts. He says it's more efficient. I stared at the screen for a long moment, unmoved. Efficiency. That word again. Christopher's kind always misunderstood what real value looked like. It wasn't in slide decks or quarterly projections. It was in the small things they never measured. The honor of a correct greeting, the timing of a translated joke, the pause before speaking in a second language not to show power, but respect. He didn't understand. Not yet. But he would. That evening I sat by the window in my apartment, rain painting soft streaks across the glass. Tea steamed in my hand, my laptop open. I checked the time in Shenzhen, then opened a few articles on Chinese negotiation customs. Old habits, old instincts, all of it coming back, not because I had to, because I chose to. The storm was building, and this time I wasn't just standing in the eye of it, I was charting its path. Monday began like any other corporate morning. Coffee-fueled greetings, click-clack heels, elevator chatter laced with forced optimism. But on the 15th floor of Ridgemont and Wallace, tension hummed louder than the overhead fluorescence. The delegation from Gold Peak Tech was set to arrive in less than an hour, and the stakes couldn't be higher. A multi-year contract worth $24 million, one of the few remaining anchors stabilizing the company's international portfolio, was on the table. Christopher sat at the head of the long conference table, rehearsing lines in his head like a man prepping for a performance he didn't fully understand. To his left were Martin and Carla, his hand-picked hires, all sparkle and surface. They had never even met Gold Peak in person. Their resumes were immaculate, their instincts non-existent. Across the city, I sat in my new office, sunlight pouring, through tall windows, a coffee in one hand, the other poised over my laptop. I didn't need to check the clock. I knew exactly what time it was. At 10:00 a.m., sharp, the delegation arrived. Mr. Liang, flanked by two senior advisors. Their presence was unmistakable, calm, precise, quietly powerful. They moved like people who didn't need to speak to control a room. Christopher stood smiling with all the polish of a man who had never once bothered to learn the language of humility. "Welcome, so glad you could make it," he said, hand extended a little too eagerly. The men nodded stiffly. No small talk, no bows. The atmosphere turned brittle the moment they took their seats. Christopher launched into his presentation, breezing through slides, spewing metrics and forecasts with the confidence of someone too green to realize he was already bleeding. Then, 5 minutes in, Mr. Ling raised a hand. "We would like to speak with Miss Margaret Lane." Christopher blinked. "I'm afraid she's no longer with the company," he replied, tone shifting slightly. "We've restructured our communications strategy. Much more efficient now." There was a long silence. Mr. Ling looked at his colleagues, then back at Christopher. His voice was low, steady. Miss Lane was not simply a translator. She was our strategic partner. She understood not just our language, but our values. Without her, I'm afraid we must reconsider our cooperation. Christopher tried to recover. Our new processes are even more dynamic. You have made a grave mistake, Mr. Ling interrupted. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. He stood. The others followed. There will be no renewal at this time, he said. Respect is the foundation of trust. You've shown us none. Then they left. No handshakes, no final words. Just the soft echo of polished shoes disappearing down the corridor. Christopher sat frozen. Martin fumbled to close the laptop. Carla whispered something, but no one was listening. By noon, the news had spread like wildfire. A $24 million contract. Gone. The CFO called an emergency board meeting. Emails flew. Investors demanded clarity. Christopher tried to spin the loss, blaming cultural barriers and unexpected communication breakdowns. He hinted the Singapore agency had fumbled the relationship, but the truth was already seeping out. He called her incompetent, someone whispered, said she was just a glorified translator. He thought a contractor could replace 17 years of trust, and just like that the unraveling began. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Later that week I placed a call, not through email, not through intermediaries. I used a private number, a direct line Mr. Liang had given me years ago. It rang twice before he answered. Miss Lane, he said warmly, with a touch of restrained curiosity. To what do I owe this honor? I spoke in Mandarin, slowly, respectfully. I owe you an apology for the sudden departure, for the confusion that followed. There was a pause. Then, I understand. Sometimes circumstances are beyond our control. And sometimes, I said gently, they are the result of poor judgment. Another pause. He understood. Are you calling on behalf of Ridgemont and Wallace? No, I answered. I'm calling because I believe you deserve the truth. I told him everything. No embellishment, no drama. Just facts. How I had been pushed out, how the partnership was reduced to a line item, how the new leadership misunderstood everything we had built together. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. And where are you now? Lawson. And Reed Global Consultants, I said. We specialize in international partnerships, respectfully, transparently. He chuckled, not mocking, just knowing. Perhaps it is time we consider new partners. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I simply said, I would be honored. We exchanged farewells with care. Every syllable mattered. By the end of the week, I'd arranged a quiet meeting between Gold Peak's team and Lawson and Reed's executive board. No press, no internal memo. Just 3 signatures in a silent room that would shift the weight of the industry. Back at Ridgemont and Wallace, Christopher continued spiraling, clinging to control he no longer had. His emails turned frantic. His smiles grew brittle. He demanded loyalty from people already polishing their resumes. Then came the call, an anonymous extension at first. Then again, this time a number I recognized. I picked up. Margaret, Christopher here. Hope you're well. I leaned back, smiled slightly. I'm very well, thank you. He rushed through the awkwardness. I was hoping we could talk. Maybe, find a way to collaborate, clear the air. Collaborate, I repeated. Yes, of course, no formal title, just guidance. A consulting basis, maybe. I let the silence stretch. I'd compensate you, obviously. We need someone who understands the clients, the rhythm of it all. He didn't want help. He wanted a patch, a shortcut, the illusion of control. Eventually, I said, let's meet, tomorrow, my office, 9 sharp. He sounded relieved, desperate. That night I sat at my kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a glass of wine, not in celebration, but in precision. I wasn't returning for closure, or kindness or pity. I was returning to look him in the eye and let him see who he'd underestimated. He arrived 10 minutes late, same designer suit, same expensive watch. But his confidence had cracked around the edges. I could see it in his posture, in the way he laughed a second too late. He talked fast, spun the collapse as market pressure, blamed the outsourced firm, never said the word failure. Finally, he paused. We just need someone familiar with the clients, someone who can smooth things over, no need for titles, just practical support. You're offering me a consulting role, I said calmly. No authority, no public correction, no apology for the lies you told after I left. He flushed. It's not personal, Margaret. It's business. I smiled. Razor thin. So is my answer. He blinked. I'll consider your offer, I added, voice smooth. But on my terms. What terms? He asked warily. You'll see. Because I already had what I needed. Access, leverage, time. And now? Now I'd begin. You thought. I was gone, I said as he stood to leave. But I was watching, I was waiting, and now you see what you broke. He said nothing. But the silence between us spoke volumes. And this time, it was his turn to listen. The message came early Monday morning. One final meeting request from Christopher Rains. He didn't even try to mask the urgency this time. No subject line, no bravado, just a time, a place, and a desperate hope clinging to the edges of his words. The building was crumbling around him now. Clients gone, investors rattled, staff fleeing faster than HR could process resignations. I accepted. Not to offer help. To close the chapter. We met in the same sterile conference room where he had once slid my severance envelope across the table like it was a formality. He looked different now. Drawn. The suit was the same, but the confidence was a ghost. There were dark circles under his eyes. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the chair. Margaret, he said, forcing a smile. I'm glad you came. We really need your insight now more than ever. Maybe we can... I raised a hand and cut him off. Calm, precise. I'm not here to advise you. He blinked, confusion flickering. I'm here to tell you that this is the end. A flicker of fear crossed his face, then defiance. You don't get to decide that, he snapped. I already have, I said. You fired me without understanding what I did. Replaced me with people who didn't know how to ask the right questions, let alone earn trust. You called me a social climber, told everyone I was dead weight. And now? I leaned in slightly. I'm the reason Gold Peak pulled out. I'm the reason Lawson and Reed is signing the clients you're losing. I'm the reason your board is in chaos, and your name is being whispered in damage control meetings you're not invited to. His mouth opened, but I kept going. I didn't sabotage anything. I didn't need to. I simply reminded our partners what respect looks like. They made their own decisions. He stood abruptly, rattled, desperate to salvage control. You'll regret this, I stood with him, taller. Still. No, I said, smiling, genuinely, finally. You will. He didn't follow me this time. He didn't shout. He didn't plead. He just stood there staring as I walked away without hesitation, without regret. No fireworks. No door slammed shut. Just footsteps. Steady. Echoing. Like the first ones he made when he arrived. But this time, they were mine. Back in my office at Lawson and Reed, sunlight streamed through the windows. The air smelled of eucalyptus and coffee. I brewed a cup of jasmine tea and sat by the window. My inbox chimed softly. Subject, from Mr. Liang, partnership confirmed. I smiled as I read it. Sometimes power isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it's the quiet voice in the background, the one they never thought to listen to, until it's too late. And the storm she never started? It finished exactly where she knew it would, in silence, with her hand on the last domino.